The galaxy was wide and full of wonders. But for many who lived on the edges, life was not about wonders. It was about survival. On a lonely mining colony orbiting a cold star, the ground shook each day as machines tore deep into the crust. The colony was not run by humans. It was controlled by alien slavers who forced both humans and other species to work in the tunnels. They were guarded by soldiers who did not understand mercy. Among the prisoners was a human boy named Daniel. He was no more than 12 years old, skinny and tired from the heavy labor. His hands were rough, his face smudged with dust, but his eyes still held a spark of courage. Daniel had been captured with his parents years ago, but they were taken away to other camps and he never saw them again. He worked alone, but he did not lose his hope. In those tunnels, Daniel met someone who would change his life. She was not human. She was a young alien girl, about the same age as him, belonging to a species that had long ago been enslaved by their own leaders and sold across the galaxy. Her skin was pale silver and her eyes glowed faintly in the dark, like reflections of starlight. Her name was Lyra. At first, Daniel was shy. Most humans in the camp stayed close to their own kind. Most aliens did the same. The slavers wanted it that way. They wanted to keep the workers divided so they would not join together. But Daniel saw Lyra one day struggling with a heavy container of ore. Without thinking, he stepped forward and helped her push it. A guard shouted, but Daniel did not care. From that small act, a friendship began. They worked side by side whenever they could. Lyra taught Daniel words in her language, and he taught her human words. They laughed quietly in the tunnels, their voices echoing against the stone. At night, when workers lay on the cold floor of the barracks, Daniel whispered human stories to her, tales of knights and heroes, of families and homes. Lyra listened with wide eyes. She had never known kindness like this. One evening, after a long day of labor, Daniel found Lyra sitting alone near the fence that kept them inside the camp. She looked sad, staring up at the stars through the metal wires. He asked her why she looked that way. She told him in a soft voice that her people had no freedom, no homes of their own. Even if they were freed one day, no one would accept them. She said she would never have a real family. Daniel thought for a long time. He was only a boy, but he hated the idea of his friend being alone forever. So he looked at her seriously and said, "When we grow up, I'll marry you. I'll give you a home." Lyra blinked, surprised. She tilted her head, unsure if he was joking. To her people, words like that meant little. Promises were easily broken, and she had seen lies all her life. But Daniel's voice was steady and his eyes were clear. He was not laughing. She asked him, "Do humans always speak like this?" He smiled a little. "Humans keep their promises. My father used to say a man's word is stronger than iron. I don't break promises." Lyra wanted to believe him. For the first time in her life, she felt hope warm her heart. She whispered, "Then I'll wait." From that night on, the two shared a secret bond. They talked about dreams of freedom, of running through fields, of walking under a sky without fences. Daniel promised that one day they would escape together. Lyra held on to those words like a treasure. But the galaxy is cruel, and fate often takes sharp turns. Not long after, the camp was attacked. Human ships raided the mining colony, striking against the slavers. Explosions shook the tunnels, alarms screamed, and guards ran in every direction. In the chaos, soldiers from Earth freed the human captives. Daniel was pulled away by one of them, lifted onto a transport ship. He screamed for Lyra, reaching out for her hand, but she was on the other side of the camp. The soldiers separated them, and the fire and smoke closed in between. Daniel shouted her name until his voice cracked, but the doors closed, and the ship carried him away. Lyra was left behind. The slavers quickly moved the surviving aliens to another world. She was taken with them, forced into new chains, her future uncertain. But in her heart, she carried the memory of the boy who had promised her a home. For Daniel, the years that followed were filled with change. He was returned to Earth, raised by distant relatives, and given a chance to study. The memory of the camp stayed with him like a scar. He could not forget Lyra's silver eyes or the words he had spoken. Others told him it was just a childhood dream, something he would outgrow. But he never believed that. He told himself again and again, "I made a promise." And humans don't break promises. Across the stars, Lyra grew too. She endured harsh years in servitude, carrying loads, cleaning for masters, and working under cruel hands. Many of her people lost hope. Many forgot the past. But not her. She remembered a boy's words spoken under the starlight. She remembered that humans were different. They kept their promises. Even in the darkest nights, she whispered to herself, "He will come back. One day he will come back." And so the galaxy turned, years passing like shadows across worlds. The boy became a man and the girl became a woman. They were apart, yet their bond remained unbroken. What began as a small promise in a forgotten slave camp was slowly becoming something greater, a story that the galaxy itself would one day hear. Years passed like rivers flowing into the sea. Daniel was no longer the thin boy from the slave camp. He had grown into a tall young man, strong in body and sharp in mind. The memories of his childhood still burned inside him, the harsh tunnels, the fear of guards, the friendship he had with Lyra, and most of all, the promise he had made. After finishing his studies, Daniel joined Earth's space fleet. Humanity was rising in power, spreading across the stars not as conquerors but as explorers and defenders. Many in the galaxy feared humans for their fierce determination, but others respected them. Daniel served with honor, climbing the ranks until he became an officer. His comrades admired his courage, but they also noticed he carried a quiet sadness. No one knew the full reason, though some guessed it had to do with his past. Daniel never told anyone about the promise. He believed it was his duty alone to keep it. Whenever he looked at the stars through the fleet's windows, he wondered where Lyra was. Was she alive? Was she safe? Did she remember him? His heart always whispered the same answer. Yes, she remembers. She is waiting. Far across the galaxy, Lyra had also grown. She had survived years of harsh servitude, moving from master to master as property to be used for labor. Her species was treated poorly, never trusted, never valued. Many of her people believed they were cursed to suffer forever. But Lyra carried a secret strength. She remembered the boy who had looked at her not as a tool but as a friend. She remembered his words under the stars. "When we grow up, I'll marry you. I'll give you a home." Those words became her shield. Whenever she felt despair, she whispered them. Whenever others told her promises were lies, she shook her head. She had seen a human's eyes when he spoke. She knew there was truth in him. Her chance came when freedom spread across the galaxy. After years of wars between humans and slavers, treaties were signed and many slave colonies were broken apart. Thousands of aliens were freed, given the right to choose their own lives. Lyra was among them. For the first time, she was no one's property. Yet freedom was strange. She had no family, no place to go, no idea how to begin again. She traveled to a neutral world where many freed people gathered. It was a bustling spaceport full of voices and colors. Merchants traded, refugees searched for work, and fleets from many species docked in orbit. Lyra lived in a small shelter, working as a translator since she knew both her people's tongue and the human language Daniel had taught her years ago. Even now, she carried the memory of him. Each night, she looked at the stars and wondered if humans kept such promises when so much time had passed. The answer came one ordinary morning. She was walking through the port when the crowd parted for a line of human officers. They were from Earth's fleet, wearing clean uniforms, their boots clicking on the metal floor. At their front was a tall man with dark hair and steady eyes. He carried himself with calm strength, speaking with the local leaders. Lyra froze. Her heart raced. The man was older, but she knew him at once. It was Daniel, the boy from the tunnels, the one who had promised. Her hands trembled as she stepped forward. She called his name softly. He turned, confused at first, then stunned. For a long moment, the busy port seemed to vanish around them. Daniel's eyes widened. The years fell away. He saw not just the grown woman, but the silver-eyed girl he had once held in the tunnels of the slave camp. "Lyra," he whispered. Her voice shook as she asked him the question she had held inside for so long. "Did you mean it?" Daniel did not need to ask what she referred to. He knew at once. He stepped closer, his voice steady and clear, just as it had been years ago. "Yes, I meant every word." The silence that followed was heavy. Humans standing nearby looked at one another, realizing something important was happening. Other aliens in the port turned their heads, surprised to see such emotion in a simple reunion. To Lyra's people, promises were fragile things, often broken without shame. To see a human keep a promise across years and light years was shocking. Tears filled Lyra's eyes, though she had not cried in many years. She had lived through chains, hunger, and fear, but nothing had broken her hope. Now, standing before him, she realized her faith had not been wasted. The human officers gave Daniel space, respecting the moment. One of them whispered to another, "This is why people fear us. Not because of our ships or weapons, because we don't let go." Daniel reached out his hand. Lyra hesitated for a breath, then placed hers in his. His grip was warm and steady, the grip of someone who would never let go again. From that day forward, word spread among the refugees and traders. A human officer had found someone from his childhood, and he had not forgotten his promise. Aliens whispered about it in markets, in ships, in hidden corners. Humans are different, they said. They keep their word even when no one expects it. For Lyra, it was not just about words. It was about finally belonging somewhere. She had been told all her life that she would never have a family. But here was a man who refused to let the past be erased. Here was someone who believed loyalty was sacred. Daniel brought her aboard his ship with the captain's permission. The crew treated her kindly, curious about her and protective of her. For the first time, she walked halls without chains on her wrists. For the first time, she felt she was free not only in body but in heart. At night, when the stars stretched outside the window, Daniel and Lyra stood side by side. He told her of Earth, of its forests and oceans, of families who gathered for meals and laughed together. She listened, her heart filling with wonder. It was everything she had once dreamed when they whispered in the tunnels. She looked at him one evening and said softly, "Your people must think you strange for keeping such a promise." Daniel shook his head. "My people think it strange if you break one." Lyra smiled, a real smile, one she had not known in years. She understood now. Humans were not strong because of muscle or weapons alone. They were strong because they believed in something deeper. And in that moment, she knew her life had truly begun again. The stars outside the viewport stretched like silver rivers as the ship traveled through space. Lyra often stood there, watching them with quiet wonder. For most of her life, stars had meant only distance and sorrow. They were reminders of how far freedom was. But now, with Daniel beside her, the stars seemed closer, as if they were leading her toward a new life. The crew quickly grew used to her presence. At first, some were surprised that their officer had brought aboard an alien woman from the refugee port. But when they learned she was from his childhood and had lived through the same dark years, they respected the bond. Humans valued loyalty, and Daniel's loyalty was something no one questioned. Yet whispers began to spread beyond the ship. Traders carried the story to other worlds. Refugees repeated it around fires. A human officer kept a childhood promise, they said. He remembered a girl from long ago and stood by her, even when no one else believed such things mattered. For many aliens, it was almost impossible to believe. In their societies, promises were words used for advantage, not for truth. To keep one after so many years seemed foolish to them, but for others it was a spark of hope. If humans treated words as sacred, then perhaps they were the kind of allies worth trusting. Daniel did not seek fame. For him it was simple. He had promised. And now that he had found Lyra again, he would not let her go. He spent his free time helping her adjust to life among humans. He taught her about Earth's cultures, its music, its stories, its traditions. Lyra listened with quiet fascination, sometimes laughing, sometimes crying. One evening in the mess hall, she asked him, "Why do humans value promises so much? Why do you treat them as something stronger than chains?" Daniel thought for a moment. Then he said, "Because promises are what make us more than survival. My father once told me that anyone can fight for themselves, but it takes something greater to fight for someone else. When we give our word, we say to the universe that we will not abandon what matters." Lyra nodded, feeling the truth in his words. For years, she had been told her life was worth little. But here, she was learning she had value simply because she was someone who had been promised love and home. Their bond deepened as the days passed. It was not just the memory of the past that tied them together. It was the present, the laughter they shared, the quiet conversations, the way they stood side by side in the observation deck. The crew began to whisper among themselves that they looked less like two survivors and more like two people building a future. When the fleet next docked on Earth, Daniel brought Lyra down to the planet. She stepped onto soil that was alive with green grass and tall trees. The air was fresh, filled with scents she had never known. Children ran freely, playing without fear of guards or fences. For Lyra, it was like walking into a dream. Daniel introduced her to his distant relatives who welcomed her kindly. Though she looked different, they treated her as one of their own. At night, she sat by a fire and listened to earth songs, and for the first time in her life, she felt she truly belonged. But not everyone across the galaxy saw their union with joy. Some alien leaders mocked the story, saying, "Humans are reckless. They waste their loyalty on meaningless words." Others worried. They began to understand that humanity's strength was not only in weapons but in something far more dangerous: faithfulness, love, and the courage to build trust where others saw none. One alien elder said in council, "Do you see what this means? Humans will not only fight for themselves, they will fight for anyone they give their word to. That makes them unstoppable." And so the story of Daniel and Lyra grew. It spread from planet to planet until it became a quiet legend. Humans keep their promises. Lyra herself struggled with the weight of it. She often told Daniel, "I am just one person. Why should my life be a symbol to so many?" He would smile gently and answer, "Because sometimes one person is enough to show the truth." Eventually, Daniel asked her openly, without hesitation, "Will you marry me now, Lyra? Not because of what I said long ago, but because I still mean it today." Her eyes filled with tears and she whispered, "Yes." I waited because I believed, and now I see I was right. Their wedding was simple, held under the open sky of Earth. Humans and a few aliens attended, watching as vows were spoken. For Lyra, the moment felt unreal. To stand free, to be honored, to be joined with someone who had once been a boy in chains beside her. It was everything she had thought impossible. When Daniel placed the ring on her finger, he said, "This is not just a symbol. This is my word given forever." And she answered, "Then I will hold it forever." For Earth, it was the union of two souls. For the galaxy, it was a declaration. The story traveled far beyond the ceremony. Refugees told their children. Traders carried it into the outer colonies. Even soldiers on distant fronts repeated it as a tale of hope. The lesson was clear. To underestimate humanity was to misunderstand them. They did not forget. They did not abandon. Years later, when new conflicts arose and allies hesitated, it was the memory of that promise that convinced many alien groups to stand with humans. They said if they kept one promise through the years, perhaps they will keep others. And so a simple vow made by a boy in a slave camp became the seed of trust that changed countless lives. As Daniel and Lyra walked hand in hand beneath Earth's sky, she whispered softly, "You gave me a home." He looked at her with steady eyes and said, "And I always will." The stars above seemed to shine brighter that night, as if the universe itself honored the truth. Humans were not the strongest or the oldest in the galaxy. But they were something far more dangerous, far more powerful. They were a species that kept its promises, and that made all the difference.